Yeah, to say it's a disaster is a compliment. I mean, I could not find anybody to say a good word about Urban Meyer or basically defend him. And I'm not anti-Urban Meyer.
Tony, I wanted to bring you on here because on Sunday you had dropped a story ProFootballNetwork.com about Urban Meyer facing the possibility of being fired soon. And obviously, he's been no stranger to the headlines this season. Some dysfunction in Jacksonville. Obviously, going through it, your article and your report had suggested that you had heard along the lines that if he, in fact, does lose to the Houston Texans this upcoming week, he could potentially be fired. But just the disarray in that organization, I wanted to get your thoughts on it from somebody who's just observed that team so far this season, everything that's happened.
Yeah, to say it's a disaster is a compliment. I mean, I could not find anybody to say a good word about Urban Meyer or basically defend him. And I'm not anti-Urban Meyer. You know, Adam Beasley did great work at Pro Football Network, really breaking that story before the quote-unquote mainstream football media took the football and ran with it. So I decided to make a few phone calls on Sunday and really even through this early morning. And it was just so lopsided against Urban Meyer. And yesterday when I spoke to people, it was either they told me that I was right on with my report, or people who didn't really want to talk about it. Players were like, listen, you know, I'm just going to go about my business. I could not get a single person to say a good thing or even defend Urban Meyer. If you remember, about 2 months ago, I wrote a story about the New York Jets and sort of the dysfunction and its struggles that Robert Saleh was having. But in that article, the fact was Robert Saleh has not lost the Jets locker room. There were a lot of players who were really behind Robert Saleh and believe what Robert Saleh is preaching. It seems just the opposite. In fact, from everyone I've spoken to, it is just the opposite with Urban Meyer. And I think, you know, after these reports come out and Urban Meyer says they're all a bunch of lies. Oh, by the way, but if there are any leaks coming out of the locker room, that person's going to be fired. He just makes himself look even more foolish. I mean, if it's all lies and none of it's true, why should you be worried about leaks coming out of the locker room?
I think that's a big sign about his need for control as well. And he's no stranger to controversy going back to University of Florida, not to mention even at Ohio State with being placed on leave there, being suspended, and then obviously retiring due to medical issues there. In your opinion, is it more so his grasp for control in a sense? Because obviously the NFL, you're dealing with grown men and it's not college anymore. It's a different dynamic. And even with coaches too, as you mentioned, he came out and he flat out said to Jay Glazer, I'm hard on my coaches. Obviously, there's a disconnect between he and his perception of what he believes he's doing right versus how everybody else is taking it. And obviously, there's the high road. And obviously, Khan has a very, very tough decision to make. But in my opinion, Tony, it shouldn't be a tough decision at all.
No. And the thing is this, I think one of the points that was brought out to me, and I mentioned it in the article, was the word hypocrisy was constantly used with Urban Meyer. Practice what I preach, not what I practice. He talked about values and family and team. And then he goes, hangs out in his bar, you know, his restaurant in Columbus, Ohio, after they lose to the Cincinnati Bengals, and the team takes the plane home by themselves. So there's a lot of, unlike say Robert Saleh, who leads by example, Urban Meyer is directing people and, you know, not following his own direction, if you will. And there's also the concern that he's just completely disorganized. He's completely unorganized. And somebody kind of tagged me in a tweet. Evidently, a reporter asked him about Andre Cisco, the safety that they drafted out of Syracuse. And he said, yeah, Cisco's playing a little bit more. I don't know exactly how much he played, but he's getting better. It turned out Cisco didn't play a single snap on Sunday. So I think the problem is, and you're right, if all of this is true, and I don't have anyone who has dissented against it, said, no, that's not true, or we disagree with it, or we're with coach, it should be an easy decision for Khan. It should be a very easy decision because it's going to have long-term ramifications. You know, you've got a quarterback in Trevor Lawrence who you hope is going to be your franchise, who really hasn't progressed. And I mean, Trevor Lawrence is out there saying we need James Robinson in the game more. We need to hand the ball more. This is a first-year quarterback saying, you know, the system's not working. You're not going to be able to bring in big-name free agents to plug holes. You're not going to be able to keep your own free agents that you want to keep. You know, if Khan lets Urban Meyer go, there's a lot of money. He's at risk for, you know, he's on the hook for a lot of money. But, you know, the long-term ramifications will be even worse. And I don't get the idea that Urban Meyer is going to be able to turn it around. I don't get the idea that even if he does a 180 now, the team is going to buy, the players on the roster are going to buy in right now. I get the feeling that if Urban Meyer called a meeting tomorrow and said the sun rises from the east, players aren't going to believe him, even though the sun does rise from the east. It's that sort of situation. As far as him potentially getting fired sooner rather than later, that was the opinion of someone I spoke with who's close to the organization, because they know what's going on. They know the inner workings. I don't know that they know what the owner is going to do, but that is the feeling of a lot of people.
Obviously, the Jaguars not in the playoff conversation, but in terms of being able to salvage a little bit of respectability in terms of the character and even the viewpoint, as you mentioned, of that locker room, and even for players in that locker room, potential free agents, if they do make this move to get rid of Urban Meyer, how much of a consideration is Charlie Strong here? And does he have potential consideration, even if he's interim? Does he have a chance to come back next year as the guy?
Well, the latter part of that question is you got to wait and see. I mean, I have heard that Strong has built momentum that if they do get rid of cut Meyer loose, anytime before the season's over, they will bring in Charlie Strong. Now, Charlie Strong, another college coach who really didn't have near the success, if any of the success, that Urban Meyer had in the college level, a players type of coach. Would he be their guy for the future? I don't know. The question is, if you get rid of Urban Meyer, what do you do with Trent Baalke, the general manager who really pushed to get Urban Meyer to Jacksonville? Do you keep Trent Baalke, or do you bring in a general manager to run the entire show?
Oh, a lot of great questions here for the Jacksonville Jaguars organization. I know that based on seeing the timeline, various Jaguars fans, they've been done passing. Even a lot of media members have been very vocal. There was that one time, too, because obviously I'm Denver media. There was a time he didn't even jump on the conference call with all of us in the Denver media. It was the one time that it had happened, obviously kind of stemming off of that, the controversy there. But outside of that, Tony, I appreciate your insight here. And obviously, ladies and gentlemen, you can check out Tony's work, ProFootballNetwork.com. Not to mention every Thursday, he and Cam Miller, they host Between the Hashes, an NFL draft and college football podcast. It's bowl game season. Not to mention the transfer portal is very active. Hear Tony's latest rumblings on there, Between the Hashes, this Thursday here on twitch.tv/ProFootballNetwork. Tony, thank you so much for jumping in. Appreciate you.
Thanks for having me.
And we're going to bring back on Dalton Miller. Dalton, obviously a lot of insight there from Tony. The Jaguars, one of the key words that Tony had said, right? Hypocrisy, which that kind of lines out perfectly, because talking about Urban Meyer, I had kind of said it earlier today. I think Urban Meyer is a walking contradiction. And I think when you take a look at where the Jacksonville Jaguars are at, they do have a talented roster. I mean, they have a talented wide receiver in Laviska Shenault that somehow he can't be utilized in the way that is necessary. So I think that's something we have to look at. But in your opinion, what are your thoughts on what Tony had said about Urban?
Anybody with eyes and ears that actually paid attention knew that this was going to be a disaster. I never understood the hiring in the first place. And the year before, when the Cowboys hired Mike McCarthy, there was 1 million Cowboys fans that were, pining for Urban Meyer to be the head coach. And they see the wins. They see him winning national championships in college and don't understand how much different the pro game is than the college game. For me, it was a bad hire to begin with, and it was awful to let him get back on that plane after that game because the players are done with him. The players are absolutely done. The coaches don't respect him anymore at this point. You're not being hard on your coaches. You're being an asshole. And it's all because he wants that type of control. He wants to control every single little detail. And at the college level, you can do that. But you're not going to go out there and be an asshole to your coaches or to your players and expect that to fly. These are professional athletes who are being paid more than you are. Yeah. Listen, Trevor Lawrence is more important than you, Herb. If he says put James Robinson in the game, put James Robinson in the game right away. To not know that your guys aren't even playing football, the Andre Cisco stuff was hilarious to me. Hilarious. There's no reason for you to not know that a guy doesn't even get into the game. You want all this control, but then at the end of the day, you obviously don't have any control on the sideline. So what is it? It's all just a facade. He wants to look powerful. He wants to be able to get on his plane and go to his bar in Columbus and do whatever he wants.